So bone is not completely solid, but has many small spaces between its cells and the components of the extracellular matrix. Some spaces serve as channels for blood vessels that supply bone cells with nutrients. Other spaces act as a storage site for red bone marrow. Now, depending on the size and the distribution of the spaces between the cells and the components of the extracellular matrix, these regions of bones can be classified as either compact bone or spongy bone. So compact bone, which can also be referred to as cortical bone, contains few spaces between bone cells and the components of the extracellular matrix. It's found beneath the periosteum of all bones, and it makes up the bulk of the diaphysis, or that shaft of a long bone. Compact bone is strong and provides protection and support. It also resists the stresses produced by the weight of gravity and of movement. Now, compact bone is composed of repeating structural units called an osteon. So this is an osteon here. This is another one here, here, and here. Each osteon consists of concentric lamellae arranged around a central canal. So the concentric lamellae are circular plates of mineralized or calcified extracellular matrix of increasing diameter. So it's this ring here, and then here, and then here, and then here. Each layer is a ring of concentric lamellae. These concentric lamellae circle around what we call a central canal, which is like a little tunnel which runs through the center of an osteon and contains our blood vessels and our nerves. The central canal of an osteon tends to run parallel to the long axis of a bone. Now, between our concentric lamellae are small spaces called lacunae. A lacuna with no E on the end is the singular. And these are small spaces surrounded by the extracellular matrix, which now contain an osteocyte. So remembering we have our osteoblasts, which secrete that osteoid or the extracellular matrix. They secrete it all around itself. When that osteoblast becomes trapped in that extracellular matrix in the space called the lacuna, we now term that cell the osteocyte. Now, radiating in all different directions out from that osteocyte are the osteocyte's processes, and they run through little channels called the caniculi. The caniculi connect the lacunae with one another so the osteocytes can communicate, as well as with the central canal, forming an interconnected network of canals throughout the bone. This system provides many routes for the nutrients and the oxygen to reach the osteocytes, as well as for the removal of wastes. Lastly, blood vessels and nerves from the periosteum, so remember the tissue that surrounds our bone, penetrate into the compact bone through transverse perforating canals. You may also see these termed Volkmann's canals. The vessels and the nerves of the perforating canals will connect with those of the medullary cavity, of the periosteum, and of the central canal. So again, recapping some of those structures for you, which I do want you to be able to identify on an image and provide a function. So an osteon is that compact cylinder of concentric lamellae, and it's the structure that makes up compact bone. So very important that we know that osteons make up compact bone. Our concentric lamellae are the circular rings of calcified extracellular matrix, and those rings are what forms the osteons. The central canal is that small tunnel which runs through the center of the osteon, It houses both our blood vessels and our nerves. The lacunae are the small hollow spaces between the concentric lamellae which house the osteocyte. The osteocyte we've already talked about. It's our mature bone cells that sit within the lacunae. They monitor and maintain the metabolism of bone tissue. The caniculi are those thin channels containing the processes of the osteocytes. They connect the different lacunae so that the osteocytes can communicate with one another. And then the perforating or the Volkmann's canal connect the vessels and nerves of the periosteum, the medullary cavity, and the central canals. Spongy bone, which is also referred to as cancellous bone, is always located in the interior of the bone, protected by a layer of compact bone. Instead of osteons, it's made up of lamellae arranged in an irregular pattern of thin columns, which we call trabeculae. Between the trabeculae are spaces that are visible to the naked eye, so you can see the gaps in between those trabeculae. And those spaces are filled with red bone marrow in bones that produce blood cells, and then yellow bone marrow in the other bones. So somewhat like osteons, each trabecula consists of our concentric lamellae. It has osteocytes in the lacunae and caniculi connecting the osteocytes. Now, at a glance, the order or the structure of the trabeculae of spongy bone tissue appears quite unorganised, especially compared to the tight, compact structure of the osteons of compact bone. However, they are actually deliberately orientated along lines of stress, a characteristic which helps bone resist stress and transfer force without actually breaking or snapping in half. Now, spongy bone tissue tends to be located where bones are not heavily stressed, but where stresses are applied from many directions. So whereas compact bone is thickest under high levels of force or weight bearing, and where the line of stress is from only one angle, so for example, the weight of gravity is kind of only moving downwards, the spongy bone will be placed in a part of the bone where it could be pulled in all different directions. Now, although it's not as strong as compact bone, spongy bone tissue helps lighten the overall weight of a bone, which is important. We don't want our skeletons so heavy that we actually struggle to move. And spongy bone tissue also plays an important role in supporting and protecting the red bone marrow, which is where our blood cell production occurs.